But here, on the very rim of known space, justice is a long way away.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie podcast. I am always your co-host, Brian. Joining me, as always, is your co-host, Spaz.
I'm taking my turn.
Your co-host, Julie.
Hello from the great snowy north.
Is it snowy again up there?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. Also joining us is your co-host, Thorsten.
Hello from Germany.
Your co-host, Jacob. Uh-oh.
Sorry, I'll get back to you on that later. Carry on.
Okay, and your co-host, David.
Yeah, hello.
And friends, joining us this week, we have a guest from, Ken, remind me, where are you calling from? Remember?
Troy, New York.
Okay.
Home of Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute.
Rensselaer Poly? I don't know.
Yep. Hey, any university that names their sports team the Engineers.
Oh, okay. Wasn't there a movie in the 80s that took place there? Am I remembering of it different? What movie?
There have been two movies that have been filmed at RPI, and I'm blanking on the names for both of them. But
I think I know one of them. One of them was like a sci-fi kind of experiment gone
and that,
wrong.
Ladies and gentlemen, is tangent number one.
You know what? Okay. So friends, we have a guest calling from New York, Ken Burnside, owner and operator of Ad Astra Games, which is a board game company. Do they win much? Which is a board game company that makes hyper real. Would you call them hyper realistic 3D space combat board games using
and jet combat?
Oh, and
combat
there is one jet
games.
combat game. That's right.
Yeah, everyone forgets Birds of Prey exists.
No. The people who love Birds of Prey know that it exists. The people who don't know that Birds of Prey exists are going to love it when they find out about it.
Apologies. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. My pitch on this is that what I really do is I make flight simulators that work on tabletop for people with slow eyesight and bad reflexes.
Well, that's your pitch.
That's a terrific pitch. So Jacob, this our guest today was your idea, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Well, basically,
idea in the sense that I mentioned I'm on the Space Games podcast, and Ken went over and asked, "Hey, can I be there? Do you take guests?"
Well, Ken, you've been on here before. Do you? It's been a while.
Yes,
but you were here back in 2016, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Just before I moved to New York. Mostly because of James, who doesn't seem to be part of your co-host coterie anymore.
No, James and Hunter, who used to be our co-hosts, they left to do their own thing. Do you remember what that's called, Spaz? Is it something .gg?
Otherworlds.gg.
Thank you. Otherworlds.gg. That's their thing now. So we replaced 2 co-hosts with 4 co-hosts, and now we have 6 co-hosts. But
so they're like triples. You leave food around and they multiply.
Kind of, sort of.
Like cats, kind of. Except that no cat in recorded history has ever been fed.
Yes, in recorded history.
You ask them; they'll tell you.
Speaking of, please pass our regards to upper management.
Yes, Ad Astra Games is a one monkey supervised by one cat game company.
So, right, let's get on topic. So, Mr. Ken, let's start from the beginning, and by the beginning being, let's assume that the audience know absolutely nothing about who you are and what you do. So, who are you and what do you do?
So, At various points in my time, I have done journalism. I've managed phone bank rooms and worked for political campaigns. But I started out playing games about 1981 or thereabouts with Raid on Iran by Steve Jackson Games. And then got into Car Wars, and then bumped into D&D for a while, and then into Champions, and then into BattleTech. Had a friend who also had a first edition BattleTech box when it was called Battle Droids, but by the time I got into it was called BattleTech. And he was very careful to never let that box off of his shelf or be touched by anybody with grubby fingers, because he knew it was going to be worth something someday.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much.
First edition BattleTech? Yeah, absolutely.
When it was called Battle Droids, absolutely. That was before that was before LucasArts told them, Lucasfilm told them, ahem.
Really?
We have the trademark on droids, therefore you cannot use it.
They have the trademark on droids?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Jeez.
That is exactly why what was originally called Battle Droids had to be changed to BattleTech.
So I stumbled into spaceship gaming, about 1988, just as I was coming out of high school, and found Starfire, which was in its second edition and was in the process of dying. Then I found Starfleet Battles, which was at the end of Commander's Edition and was in the process of dying.
I'm noticing a pattern here.
Isn't that kind of? I gotta say, isn't that kind of good though? If it's in the process of dying, that means you can get everything and not worry about playing catch up. Isn't that in a way a good thing?
Yeah, and then I heard that Starfleet Battles was coming out with a new edition finally, because Commander's Edition had its last product come out in '87. And got into playtesting on that and started working on Starfleet Battles as a playtester and then writing scenarios for them and writing products for them. And I did significant amounts of playtesting for Starfleet Battles from about 1991 to roughly 2003.
Wow.
And ran Battle Labs and was the executive developer for a product line called the Omega Quadrant or Omega Sector, and then wrote my own product called the Magellanic Clouds. In 2005, I became their marketing director, and basically moved to Amarillo and worked in their office. And in the process of being their marketing director, was also the uncredited co-designer of the Federation Commander game, which was a game that was meant to capture the large audience of people who used to play Starfleet Battles and stopped when it became a 1,400-page rulebook with 9-point text at about 1,200 words per page.
Jesus.
In the midst of this, about 2001, in 2000, while I was watching the Super Bowl, I was sitting there mucking around with a spreadsheet as I was watching TV.
As one does.
As one does, and worked and independently re-derived the formula for displacement under acceleration. D equals 1/2 times a times t squared, and then figured out how to make that work as a segmented movement system. And said, okay, well, let's see if I can turn this into a Starfleet Battles faction. And the short answer was no, I couldn't. But when I put that together, I went onto a mailing list called SF ConsimL, and found a whole bunch of nerds who have been playing vector movement spaceship combat games for 20 or 30 years of various varieties, and it was a known thing. We know how vector movement spaceship combat works. And I was saying, but you're not doing it right because you're not factoring in displacement over time. Oh, that's an irrelevant thing. It doesn't matter. And so I put together a PDF that is up on Winchell Chung's website, Atomic Rockets. It was one of the very first things he posted up there that was comparing non-displacement vector movement with vector movement and how the errors accumulate over about 2 or 3 turns.
So Chad is asking, is this entire project started as a side effect of the Super Bowl being boring?
No, actually, that was not one of the boring Super Bowls. That was the one that that was the first one that the Rams won against the Tennessee Titans. The one that was basically the one where they stopped the Titans about 4 feet short of a game-winning touchdown in the last second.
Right, I'm sure I would understand any of that if I watched the Super Bowl ever. Carrying on.
And then you velcro your lemons to the cat.
Understood.
Yes. So at that time, the game was basically two-dimensional. But I was talking on the SF ConsML list and had figured out a better way of doing vector movement than had been the standard in the industry for the standard of the game as in the gaming field for going on 30 years. The very first vector movement game was Triplanetary, which came out in 1975 and has been recently reprinted by Steve Jackson Games.
Great game, by the way.
And it is a great game. So after fixing that, I started working on a project called Delta V, which got published in 2001. And in the process of doing that, a friend of mine that I made on the SF ConsML mailing list said, "Hey, what would you say if I told you that I know a group of guys who are putting together an air combat game, and they've managed to make 3D actually work?"
Bold claim.
Said, well, I said, bold claim. I'll go take a look at it, and I got onto the Air Battle mailing list and got to see the massive churn of the rule set that eventually became the massive churn of the rule set that eventually became Birds of Prey in 2000 and 2001 to 2002, and got to see several iterations of their play called the Pitch Heading Attitude display. And I looked at the pitch heading attitude display and said, I see why they're doing it that way. I'm not sure that the extra fiddliness of what they're doing is worth the trouble. What happens if we just rotate this outer degree, this outer ring, the 0 degree ring, back so that it lines up appropriately, so you can actually face a hex side and a hex corner? And that became the fad. That was the fad, and that became the AVID, or Attitude Vector Information Display.
So the first one was just a fad, but then you improved it.
Indeed. The Birds of Prey still uses the fad, and both of the spaceship games use the AVID. And after putting that together, and after bouncing off of their tutorial for the fad a couple of times, and then finally figuring out what it was, why it worked, and the things that I needed to learn in the appropriate space of time to make sure that I understood it, I started writing the tutorial for it for Delta V. It was a bad tutorial, but I learned a lot from doing it. Delta V came out in 2001. In 2002, after having sold out of the original 300 copies of Delta V, I put together what became Attack Vector, which came out in 2004. And in the midst of that, I also came up with tilt blocks and stacking tiles and making your counters for your ships, little cardboard fold-ups with basically artwork on six sides of a cardboard box, or box miniatures, as I like to call them, or hollow cubes, because they're hollow and they're cubes, or cuboids at the very least. And with tilt blocks and the hollow cubes, what turned that was basically the second half of the problem for getting 3D to work right. Because the problem with 3D on tabletop games is you're always having to ask, so what is your pitch and roll again, across the table as you're looking at the flat counter? What's your altitude again, as you're looking at the flat counter? And with tilt blocks, stacking tiles, and box miniatures, that was all on the table where it needed to be, where everybody could see it. The other thing that I introduced them to was, hey, if you laminate your play aid cards, you can use dry erase markers on them. And this way you don't have to actually use little flat counters for the 3 symbols that you're using on the FAD to keep track of things, so that the next time somebody opens a door, nobody has to reset their aircraft orientation state. Which is why all of the games that I publish have laminated cards in them, because that is such a great usability aid. So since then, I've won an Origins Award. I've contributed to several other spaceship combat games, because honestly, my pitch is, so long as we're all blowing up spaceships, everybody wins.
Respectable. Alongside, if it's not on the schedule, it doesn't exist, and we always round towards explosions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the point of any good space combat game, really.
Yep, it is also a mathematical principle in Squadron Strike. But so far we've established the origin story up to and including Birds of Prey. But how did the whole? So from what I recall, Attack Vector Tactical was the first game to come out, and
Yep.
how exactly did it come about, so to speak? What? I do. I'm kind of imagining it was kind of a convergence of all the ideas from the previous games. But how
To
did
some extent, yes.
the idea of it come about?
So, having had an argument with an entire mailing list about how you're doing vector movement wrong, and having come away convinced that yes, they were doing vector movement wrong, I decided to make a game where the vector movement was done right. And the key to that was a play aid that's on the attack vector play aid card, which is the thrust chart, which shows both acceleration over time and displacement over time as two overlapping variables on a color-coded table. And then in between, and then to make it work for 3D, I had to make that chart handle both flying level with a map and flying at 30 degree, 60 degree, 90 degree pitch angles with a map. And that gave me the space to go and put the little dots in between the half columns for how you track your fuel. So this is literally a card that is the size of an American business card, a chart the size of an American business chart card that tracks 5 different variables for physics all at once. And does so in a nice, clean, pretty way. And with that, I had the game engine for Attack Vector. After that, it was just a matter of building ships and then doing a whole bunch of research on how things take damage in space to make sure that the damage model was actually made for an interesting and fun game. Because there are lots of situations where a real world combat situation does not actually make for a fun game. For example, modern naval surface combat. You don't have any ability to maneuver after the weapons have been fired, and the weapons are in the range of 1 to 2 hits will take out any ship.
Yeah, you apply every conceivable piece of ordnance you have towards the enemy and pray that your defenses hold out.
Yeah, and they won't.
They won't. Eventually, something will get through.
Right. So in Attack Vector, one of the things that I tried very hard to do was tune it so that the beam weapon outputs wouldn't render kinetic weapons obsolete, and that the kinetic weapon damage potential wasn't so high that everybody would just flew kinetic weapons. I also had a number of collaborators on the project, and one of them, by the name of Eric Finley, came up with the Shellstar solution for dealing with incoming projectiles. And the Shellstar solution is a set of procedures that you follow in Attack Vector when you launch a kinetic weapon, and it is a 9-step procedure that involves looking things up on tables and doing very simple arithmetic, which causes people who are math phobics to go twitch, ew. But what it does is over those 9 steps, it walks you through not 1, not 2, but 3 Newtonian reference frame shifts, and you fill out a card and hand it to your opponent, and now all of those incoming projectiles are his problem to deal with. They're not tracked on the map. You don't have to move them around. He knows when they're going to arrive. He knows what he has to do to avoid them, and then he's sitting there going, crap.
which is what fundamentally the most fun parts of war games. It is looking at a problem and figuring out, right, how do I deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
So, as a minor sort of, not necessarily a tangent, just bring this up. It seems like the primary focus of Ad Astra is to essentially make games that are complex, but throw enough play aids and do enough of the math and the big number calculations for you that you don't have to bother with the actual mathematics. You have to learn how to play the game. Right.
The pitch that I like to say on that one, in addition to the flight simulators for people with slow eyesight and bad reflexes, is that we do the scary math so you can blow things up. One of the pieces of scary math that we have in there, if you take a look at an Attack Vector SSD, in the lower left-hand corner, there's a series of squares and circles.
I have never seen one, so...
Yeah, well, I will throw something up here in the chat for a moment, but give me a moment while I chatter and do it the same thing. There is a set of circles and squares that are there that are tracking your fuel. Each column of fuel is one whole space of fuel. When you take damage to a fuel tank, you mark off an entire column. When you burn fuel, you spend it from left to right. As you burn fuel from left to right, the units change shape from circles to squares. As you change shape from circles to squares, you end up in what happens is that is tracking how much your ship's mass has decreased over the course of applying thrust. And every time you change shape from circles to squares and back to circles again, you end up in a situation where, oh, hey, that's let's go find an SSD that's just by itself so you guys can take a look at it. That'll do. There, I just sent this up in the chat for you to take a look at, Jacob.
Thank you.
It's a PDF, unfortunately. So each time that you change from circles to squares, your ship's mass is decreased enough that your maximum thrust is increased. So as you're burning fuel, your ship gets a little bit livelier in terms of its thrust. If you take a look at the track that's down there, you'll notice that some of those fuel tanks, some of those fuel columns have extra units of fuel on them, and they're towards the right-hand edge of the set. That's because as you're burning fuel, your ship is getting lighter, and as you're getting lighter, it takes minutely less amounts of fuel to get the same amount of thrust. Mm-hmm. So we do the scary math so you can blow things up because nobody really wants to do calculus at the table.
Correct. More importantly, no one has the time to do calculus at a table. Even people that want to do calculus will run to the issue of it just taking forever. And
you don't want to have people taking 45 minutes to take one turn.
Yes.
No. Well, that does actually happen in Attack Vector because a turn is made up of 8 segments. But, I joke on my server that we're going to have the Attack Vector real-time challenge where everybody has to play Attack Vector at 16 seconds per segment.
If I may at this point, I'm starting to feel like I did back in grad school in advanced statistics when the instructor explained how to do linear regression by hand. And I just wondered if, it's like, okay, for those of us to whom board games within the last decade were usually things like chess, the occasional video game, how would I, as a neophyte to board games, kind of get involved in all this without looking at all that's going on and saying, oh my God, I'm lost? I think I'm going back to something simple.
So, first of all, I acknowledge that what I'm doing is a niche product. I would love, there's a timeline where the kids that went from Pokemon to Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't go to Magic the Gathering, they went to Attack Vector. And in that timeline, we have a space program that's already using nuclear rockets. I know this. Yes. I treat it as I treat it as an article of faith. But in Attack Vector, the first chapter of the rulebook is a literal fly-through tutorial. And if you actually set up the map and set up the chocolates and set up the box miniatures and go through and shoot the chocolates for the 3 turns of programmed scripted learning, you will learn everything in the game that is not kinetic weapons in those 3 turns, and you'll see how all the pieces and parts fit together. The fact that I do all the math, and you could see the math, but the math is behind a 6-foot thick quartz wall, so it can't bite your fingers.
Not for lack of trying, though. Not for lack of trying.
And the way I describe it is that when I see reviews of Attack Vector that say, started reading the tutorial, writing this from hospital, was lucky my wife found me first, brains were leaking out ears, if the dog had found me, I'd be dead now.
That sounds, the level of accuracy you keep repeating that examples makes me think that was something someone wrote.
I expect that to be something that has been repeated verbatim.
So that's somebody who read the tutorial and didn't set up the math and play through it. Somebody who played the tutorial as it's intended to be played gives me reviews that say, I don't believe it. It's like a choir of angels started singing behind me and gave me 15 more IQ points. There's no possible way this should work. It shouldn't work at all. But it does. It just does. It's a miracle. You should try this. You should really, guys.
That is spot on how I felt after my first match of Squad on Strike.
So I was able to put the PDF you put in the chat up on the screen, so people can see it.
Yeah. So the thing that we were looking at is the bottom left, which is the actual fuel display. But everything else, it looks scary, but to a slightly trained eye, it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I say slightly trained because I haven't played AVT, so but it's not necessary for our current topic. So,
your next question.
Well, one thing I wanted to also add on to Julie's whole thing. If you want, while AVT is complex, there is the less complex game from Ad Astra that was made second, and that's Squadron Strike. Which would you like to introduce it, or at least the concept behind it?
Sure. So Attack Vector, when I built it, was meant to be the best physics model of space combat that we could make at the time. And to be honest, it is still a better physics model of space combat than what you can actually see in an awful lot of video games. That being said, the thing that you couldn't do in it is there's no way in hell I was going to let people try to design ships in Attack Vector, because the spreadsheet on there is best described as a Visual Basic application that is gnawing its way out of the carcass of a spreadsheet, much like a wasp larva gnaws its way out of the carcass of a tarantula. And it had magic numbers galore, and it would be very, very easy to make the best possible ship with these tech assumptions, at which point all of the other ships become obsolete, and then it stops being interesting to play.
Hello, Battletech Technical Manual. What are you doing here?
Exactly. And this is one of the problems that happened with Battletech. Their design engine was such that once you started making your own mechs, you could just clean the floor out of anything that was a book mech at the time. And so with Attack Vector, I don't release the ship design engine because, well, if people don't want to do calculus at the game table, probably more of them are willing to try doing calculus for designing a ship, but no. So I decided that I needed to make a game that had a ship design engine. And this was actually a slow, agonizing decision for me. Because a friend of mine named Dan Cast publishes a game called Starmada, which has an excellent ship design system. Starmada has a much better balanced ship design system than Squadron Strike does, in that it is almost impossible to make a ship in Starmada that doesn't work, where it's very easy to make one in Squadron Strike that doesn't work. Also, but one of the things that turned it over was that on a website called the Miniatures page, which is now still up, but kind of decimal and dusty at this point, one of Dan's most rabid customers would jump into every thread about space combat games and talk about how Starmada did that thing and did it better. And then he went and did this in Attack Vector about how Starmada did three-dimensional movement better. And then I got miffed.
You took offense.
Mildly. So I decided I was going to go and learn the lessons from Starmada and make a three-dimensional spaceship combat game that had the same plot, move, shoot sequence of play and had a player-accessible ship design system. And this came out after I did Attack Vector and after I did Saganami Island Tactical Simulator First Edition, which was a reskinning of Attack Vector with David Weber's Honor Harrington Universe stuff in it. I still apologize for SIT's First Edition, because SIT's First Edition paid too much attention to David's numbers and not enough to the feel in the books. And as a result, it was tedious to play. Not just boring, but tedious to play. So Second Edition, SIT's, was effectively a first run at doing the movement engine for what became Squadron Strike. And Second Edition for SIT's sold so much better than First Edition. It was wonderful. Then Squadron Strike came out in 2008, and I have been supporting it more or less ever since. The trick with Squadron Strike is that Squadron Strike isn't just tied to Newtonian physics as we know it. It has movement modes. The movement modes are the rules regulating how ships move, and they are named after the number of Newton's laws being obeyed. Mode 0, what are physics laws? When you turn off your engine, your ship grinds to a halt, just like an ox cart. It's Aristotelian movement. In Mode 1, your ship accumulates speed from turn to turn to turn, but only in the direction the front of the ship is facing in. So it plays a little bit like an air combat game, only there's no gravity and the geometry is a little weird and different. I call that Mode 1 movement. It obeys one of Newton's laws, and it is actually a pretty good model for how most cinematic movement is shown on on both Star Wars and Star Trek. Whenever you see the Enterprise or the Millennium Falcon turning and swerving, that's Mode 1 movement. Mode 2 movement is obeying two of Newton's laws, because you've got thrust that accumulates from turn to turn, and your vectors are completely independent of the facing of your ship, meaning that you have to swivel around 180 degrees and apply thrust in the opposite direction to slow down. And recently, we've added fuel tracking to Mode 2 movement, and can actually generate the notes on, hi, if you burned this much thrust, if you burned this much of your fuel, your thrust increases by this amount at this level, as notes for Squadron Strike. But we don't actually use that often. The fuel tracking is usually enough complexity for what most people want to do. One of the things that I've been doing with Squadron Strike is I've started out with I started out by converting Starfleet battleships, because I knew them pretty well, and use that as my, if it doesn't do this, it needs to, way of adding additional features. And then I started doing some Star Wars ships from that. One of the earliest playtests had the new Battlestar Galactica going up against an Imperial Star Destroyer.
Imagine it didn't go great.
Oh, it went hilariously. In particular, because the two players who were flying the Star Destroyer and its fighter wings, and the two players flying the Galactica and its fighter wings, were both told the rules for their movement mode, but not the other players.
Ah.
Wait, what?
I don't understand.
Exactly.
Wait, I don't understand. They can have different movement modes?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What?
On the same map in the same game.
And that.
Hold on, Brad's having a moment. Let's give him a couple seconds.
To give you an idea, Brian, think of it this way: think if you're playing Rebel Galaxy Outlaw. That's Mode 1.
Okay.
Now, the other player is using Battlestar Galactica Vipers. They're able to flip around and still fly, and this is with the inertial dampeners off, of course. And they're able to fight you that way. That's Mode 2.
Right. Clarifying questions, Brian. Clarifying questions.
How does that work on the same map? Like how?
Pretty well, actually. One side can do maneuvers that the other side can't, and the other side can do maneuvers that the first side can't. And if you know about them ahead of time, you can plan for it. If you don't know about it, you only have to worry about what you're doing. And wait, you did what?
Which is always fun.
And I did that as a convention game, and people and the players were going, okay. Wait, what do you mean the Star Destroyer just changed its direction of travel by 90 degrees without swiveling around at 180 degrees to decelerate? What do you mean those fighters are flying backwards? They can't do that. Why are those Vipers flying backwards? That's not... Oh, wait. Why is Ken smiling?
Why is Ken smiling is a very common question posed during his games. The answer is usually because things are about to get very interesting.
So I can think of one older game that used a similar system to this.
Go ahead.
Full Thrust.
Well, that's not the one I'm thinking of, though. I'm thinking of The Last Starfighter. Published by FASA, co-designed by Jordan Weissman of Battletech fame. The Gunstars could actually use a Newtonian movement, and the Armada fighters, played by the other player or one of the other players, because you could actually play it with more than two, each controlling a different squadron or a different Gunstar. They were limited in the maneuvers that they could use.
Yeah.
Very similar concept.
So
we can, go ahead, Brian.
So who won with the Battlestar and the Star Destroyer? Who won?
The Star Destroyer player, managed to outmaneuver the Colonial fighters, and the Galactica was not able to outmaneuver the TIE fighters. The Galactica's armor worked pretty well against the TIE fighters' blasters, but enough hits eventually whittled it down. It turned into basically a one-pass fight, where the Star Destroyer quickly realized that they would be able to keep the range open as long as they wanted to and let the fighters and that their fighters were not going to be avoided by the battle star. And this was kind of the expected outcome because these were two people who had never played the game before, or rather four people who had never played the game before, and each of them got a separate handout for how your units move.
Wait, you threw people who had never played the game before into this?
I did, and they had a blast. Even the Battlestar player had a blast because. It was about turn 3 when the Battlestar player went, "Wait a minute, what do you mean he just did that? Is that allowed?" And I said, yes, it is. And then the Colonial Viper started doing a deceleration burn to get into the rear facing of the Imperial Star Destroyer. And we're flying backwards and shooting forwards. And the Imperial Star Destroyer is saying, "Wait, that's not allowed." Oh. Curses.
This is a lot,
everyone.
This is a lot
for
for
a
me.
little text for you, Brian.
It's a lot for me to take in. I'm
at conventions like this, people will come in and see these games being displayed before they bought them. So you're actually getting a chance to play test a game, not just play test, but to actually give the game a try or join a tournament. Yeah, before you buy it, exactly.
Try before you buy.
An actual demo. And I've been in a few myself. So that's how this works. It's not just that they're being thrown into it because, hey, you try this game. It's they sign up to do these things.
Okay, so I've been to one wargaming convention, and there were a lot of these tables around, and so these are. I thought these were all people who knew what they were doing, but it sounds like these are
not necessarily.
These are more. A lot of these are also demonstrations to.
It's about 2/3 people who know what they're doing and are getting to play, and are getting to play the game that they really love, but only get to play it at conventions because it takes a lot of space. And about 1/3 is, "Hey, try my new game. Hey, want to try this out? Hey, I have a situation that I have this ship and this ship. Who do you think would win between a Battlestar and an Imperial Star Destroyer? Would you like to find out?"
And that's how Squadron Strike was put together.
Since then, I've done a lot of other demos and a lot of other and have a lot of different demo scenarios. I've taken to doing smaller demos with smaller ships that are easier and faster to kill, so the demos take less time, and so that there are fewer things to learn as you go through them. An example would be Romance of the Seven Realms, which is totally not Kroger brand X-Wings versus Great Value brand TIE Fighters.
Definitely not.
Wait, what?
Hold on. Let me just post the image. In stream chat.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's the wallpaper.
What the what? Romance of the Seven Realms. Okay. And what is that exactly? I'm losing track of everything here. What is it?
Is a setting for Squadron Strike because Squadron Strike has settings.
Oh, okay. Besides the ones you can make yourself, it has settings you can just start with.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, a lot of my business model with Squadron Strike is put together different settings, and the ones that sell well do follow-on products for them, and eventually get enough products out there that, oh, hey, I'm actually earning a living here.
Yes. From what I remember, the one... Okay, go on.
Attack Vector is very niche. Squadron Strike is aimed very firmly at the people who play Full Thrust or Starmada. It's more complex than either of those, or can be. But Romance of the Seven Realms is set to be about as simple a product as you can make in Squadron Strike. And I have taught people who play Fantasy Flight X-Wings how to play R7R ships by saying, "Hi, it looks a little different, but this is your X-Wing. It looks a little different, but these are my TIE Fighters. We're doing plot movement, just like you did in X-Wing. We're moving our ships according to our plot. We are figuring out what we're shooting. We're rolling dice. We're doing damage to one of the ships. The ships will have a much more detailed damage model than what you're used to, but it'll come really quick to you. And at the end of it, oh, hey, you're in an X-Wing. You have an R2 unit. You can tell them to go fix things. I wish I could do that."
So I'm looking at the products here under Squadron Strike on your website. And I noticed there's a British fleet and a Russian fleet and a Japanese fleet. Is that for one of the settings you have?
That is from the Diaspora setting, which is in the process of being rewritten. It was the setting in the first edition Squadron Strike box set, and the first edition setting wasn't great. We've got a better one in the process, where the person who was designing the ships and the person who was designing the setting collaborated a little bit more closely. Might be the best way to describe it.
Oh, and there's a couple others down here: Exiles, Stars, and
that's the one that I'm currently doing. Newton's Cradle. Yep.
Yeah, Newton's Cradle. Yeah. So there's it looks like there's 3 settings you can that are already pre-populated.
The ones that are currently printed and shipping are the one that's in the box set. That's the Empire Directorate War. Traveler, which has an alternate box set, which has the same content in it, and Romance of the Seven Realms for right now. Very shortly here, I'm going to have Exile Stars and Newton's Cradle done. Exile Stars is built on the premise of what if Star Trek were done intelligently?
Hey. Okay. Please elaborate. As a massive Trekkie, please elaborate on that.
So I love Star Trek. Before I could see, because I was born with congenital cataracts, I would sit on the couch with my dad as Star Trek reruns played. Because we lived in Fairbanks, Alaska, and there are only 2 television stations, and one of them managed to get a complete set of all of the Star Trek episodes from the 1960s, and would play them at 7:00 at night every single night. So I had Star Trek scripts memorized from sitting on the couch with my dad at the age of 4, before I could see. So I absolutely love Star Trek. That being said, Star Trek has some continuity issues, and it has some fridge logic.
Yeah, it steps on itself. Let's be fair. It's 55 years.
It's very
60 years
inconsistent. That's the one universal issue that has been there since basically day one of Star Trek.
But just basically any big universe like that will step on itself.
Runs into that sort.
Yeah.
So would I say what would it be like if Star Trek were done intelligently? That's not meant to diss Star Trek, because quite honestly, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is aimed so square in on me as a demographic that I'm halfway expecting that if I showed up in the writer's room, there would be a picture. There'd be a blown up 3 foot by 4 foot picture of that awful photo of me in my Google profile with candles in front of it as a shrine.
It's so good. It's so good.
It really is.
That episode where they were hiding in the gas giant from the Gorn.
Mm-hmm.
Just one of the best Star Trek episodes of the last few decades, I think.
Yeah. So I want you to. So anyway. Exile Stars is inspired by Star Trek. Mm-hmm. In Exile Stars, the human faction is called the Interstellar League. And they're actually refugees. They have been running for 22 years. We don't actually say what they're running from, although I know, and anybody who knows science fiction tropes can guess very easily. But they stumbled across the fringe of a multistellar interstellar government, for lack of a better term, called the Rulamani Banks. And the Rulamani Banks are run by the Rulamani, who are a species of obligate carnivores that are vaguely avian-like, who developed banking before they developed agriculture. Because banking, in the terms of being hunter-gatherer societies, is keeping track of favors. I fed you the last time I brought the meat in. You owe me a favor now. And that became the basis of their culture. The Rulamani are also very picky about what planets they consider comfortable enough to live off of, more so than humans are. And they basically said, okay, we will lease you this stretch of worlds over yonder, farther spinward, and we'll trade with you, because you obviously have things that we don't have. We are really impressed with we're really impressed with your 3D printing technology. Really, really impressed with it. Well, the 3D printing technology is built off of what Star Trek would call transporters, and it turns out that the League's heavy weapons are in fact transporters. They beam chunks of the enemy ship out of the ship and disperse it as loose atoms sorted by atomic mass, about 3,000 kilometers that away.
Delightful.
Yes. Their phaser analog is called an anti-proton auger. And like the phasers in Star Trek, it is actually the one with the overload function. Starfleet Battles got that wrong. And it turns out that being leased these worlds on the far frontier wasn't entirely an altruistic thing by the Rulamani, because a little farther to Spinward is a group of people that are a little bit more aggressive and more territorially acquisitive. And so the Rulamani put the humans as a buffer state between them and the Carthian domains.
I see. So it's a bit similar to Nexus the Jupiter incident, the storyline in there.
A little bit hither and there. It borrows from a few other things as well. The goal with this is to make a Star Trek that does not have the human faction being the dominant culture that everybody aspires to. Although this is still an aspirational society. This is still a Star Trek style human post scarcity society, or very nearly post scarcity. When you have the ability to transport things, and you have the ability to 3D and use those transporters to mine minerals and things like that, and you have the ability to reassemble things, well, you have the ability to basically make anything you can imagine. So it quickly becomes a post-scarcity economy once they're no longer terrified refugees.
Now, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum there, Newton's Cradle.
Mm-hmm.
Which I actually had the pleasure of playing myself, and was the first system I've played for Squadron Strike.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you first.
Well, fair enough. Well, if I were to introduce it, it's simply put the exact opposite, because it is supposed to be a near future hard sci-fi setting, inspired. Well, not necessarily inspired, resembling shows like The Expanse. But definitely
resonant with The Expanse.
Resonant with The Expanse, not necessarily inspired. Where things are going very, very very fine. Earth has colonized a bunch of other planets in the solar system. Then those planets decided to engage in politics, and now there's a massive proxy war happening in the moons of Titan. Sorry, in the moons of Saturn.
Moons of Jupiter, actually.
Moons of Jupiter, so not Saturn,
yep.
Where you have both the Martians and the Lunars throwing ships at local forces, who then throw the ships at each other.
Mm-hmm. The basic pitch on this setting is that that one of the three Martian governments tried to pull a bluff on the governments of Earth. The bluff got called, and it turned out that a rubble pile crashing through all of the orbital infrastructure makes orbits really hard to get to. It's called the Kessler Cascade. Without regular trade from Earth, Luna was past its carrying capacity and set up a massive migration to parts farther out system. And in the process, decided to kick the Tharsis Combine in the nuts.
The Tharsis Combine being Mars, I presume?
Being one of the Martian governments. The other two Martian governments are in the situation of, we can't really let you pick on the Tharsis Combine, even though we think they're assholes too. And thus we have politics driving the scenarios. One of the things that's in this product is that on the inside front cover, there's a map of the Jovian moons that is a Delta V map. And you can use that map as an operational map for getting around the Jovian moons, and the hexes have fuel costs to enter them. And some of the hexes are adjacent to one another based off of the periods of time, because the first three Galilean moons are all on resonances with one another, and the last one, Callisto, is almost on resonance with the other three. So it actually is playing in orbital mechanics, and you're burning the fuel and to get to these spots. And when you get to these spots, you start have a fight. You start regretting all that fuel you spent to get there, because you have other uses for it. And it's one of the very best integrated operational to tactical games I've ever seen.
Yes, to put it simply, there is actually a competent, for other people, strategic layer to Newton's Cradle specifically, on top of the usual, tactical shooty parts of Squadron Strike proper. There is, I believe it was released as a separate game, or at least like exists as a separate game.
It will be included as part of the Newton's Cradle product. The map is printed on the inside cover. We've got some materials that go in with it, and a separate little rule book for it. It has been put together as a tabletop simulator module by Tao Deichmann, the designer of it. And if you guys like having me on, perhaps next time around, after I get Newton's Cradle ready to launch, you can have Tao Deichmann and I on as a joint interview sometime.
When is that happening? Just out of curiosity.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know 2 weeks before it does, or 3 weeks before it does. But it's one of those. I have so many things that I'm juggling that I have to finish a couple of these things and ship out the newest product before I can finish off the other ones. So
understood.
It's the problem of being a one-person supervised by one cat game company.
Yes. Your website claims Newton's Cradle is expected.
Yeah, it was supposed to be out. It was supposed to be out this last summer. It was not.
Maybe change the word expected to hoped to.
Yeah, possibly.
That was June of last year.
Oh shit!
Yes.
Excuse my language. Oh,
yes,
no.
it was supposed to be out last summer.
I see.
I have the SSD book done. I have all of the rules for Wang Jian's War done and need to do layout on them. I have to finish the layout for Exile Stars, which is the current big project. In addition to shipping out Top Gun. But it's going to be Exile Stars, then Newton's Cradle, then doing the second edition, or the second printing / second edition of Romance of the Seven Realms.
So, if I may, now normally I only do complex math when I get paid to do it. And my job sometimes involves math that makes CPAs say, "Huh?" But I'm kind of a dyed-in-the-wool video game player, and I haven't played board games since college, and so my thing is, I understand you say you have a niche market, and I don't. Perhaps you never intend on expanding past that, but just when I think back in my marketing days, is my big question then becomes this: if you ever wanted to attract someone like me, whose big thing has only become video games, what would you say to someone to try and say, "Look, come play my product. Come do this. Here's why it's better"?
I would ask 3 questions of you. And if I may, I'll ask them now.
Go ahead.
What kind of pleasure do you get out of playing video games?
Oh, pure escapism. Pure escapism to get me away from the stress of the job.
All right. So you play video games to have some control over a movie that is being played out, where you have some control, where you have some agency over the actors. You don't play video games for the almost got it, damn, got to do it again. Almost got it, damn, got to do it again.
Nope, not at all.
Kind of thrill.
Pure escapism.
Right. So in the miniatures game market, there are two demographics. One demographic wants to shove their miniatures around, roll some dice, and visualize the movie that their miniatures are acting out, and maybe drink some beer and smack talk with their buddies. That market is already pretty well saturated in the spaceship game sense, with both full thrust, X-wing, and basically with X-wing, full thrust, and Starmada. And I would just direct you towards one of those other games that are produced by friends of mine. On the other hand, if you want to actually be Captain Kirk sitting in the chair of the Enterprise and worrying and knowing exactly what the capabilities of your ship are, and you want to win not because of die rolls, but because you were just a little bit more cunning at figuring out how to get that angle and that shot in than your opponent was, that's where you come into my games, because you won't get that experience with theirs. And what variety of Captain Kirk do you want to be? Do you want to be James Holden flying the Rocinante? For that, you probably actually want to play Newton's Cradle for for one end of that spectrum, or Attack Vector Tactical for the other. I have thought about what I could do to make a game that is a large number of units, roll your dice, and see the metal movie play out. And if those ever turn into something that I think is going to be fun and viable, I will publish it. But that is a different set of game design skills than the one that I currently use. As to how I would get you to sit down and play my game, assuming you wandered by at a convention, the standard question would be, "Hi, would you like to blow up some chocolates?" You kill it, you eat it.
What?
Hi, would you like to blow up some chocolates? If you kill it, you eat it.
Just like the movie, you keep what you kill.
Mm-hmm. And I find that if I say, "Hi, would you like to blow up some chocolates?" You kill it, you eat it. Somebody will say, "What?" And if they say, "What?" I have them. They will sit down for that demo. And I can do a Squadron Striker attack vector demo in about 5 to 10 minutes. And in that 5 to 10 minutes, you can decide if the game is for you, or you can decide if the game isn't, or you can say, this isn't for me, but I got a buddy who's an engineer who would be all over this. Let me go get him.
I have personally seen that happen with a lot of demos in the conventions I used to go to.
Mm-hmm. So if you've played the pen and paper game BattleTech, the Squadron Strike rulebook is shorter than the BattleTech rulebook by about 200 pages.
Having read both, I can confirm that.
Mm-hmm.
My follow-up then would be I had a good friend that used to play board games, used to play like chess with me all the time, and without being too much of a bummer, he died in the early days of COVID. So then my question becomes, is something that we talked about just very shortly before we started on the air, is there some way for me to reach out to the rest of your community and kind of do this remotely?
Absolutely. So Squadron Strike has a play aid called the Avid Assistant, which it basically takes a laminated card and puts it on your phone, and it connects to a database. So this is meant to be used on your phone in the game store with your buddy who's plotting his maneuvers on the phone and moving your miniatures on the map and rolling dice and going pew 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 and having fun. Well, about 6 months before COVID happened, I had said to my developer, it'd be nice if I had a virtual map for this. It'd be nice, but I know you're busy, so it's not going to happen. And then 2 months before COVID happened, he said, "Hey, Ken, take a look at this." And I have a virtual map that has the smartphone application as the right-hand panel in it, and a shared display and a shared map display on the other side. I'm going to go and post up a picture in the stream chat. One moment. Let's see.
Well,
and
of course, I'm going to want links to how people like me can get involved in all this, especially your Discord.
Mm-hmm. I will get to the Discord in just a moment, but that's a picture of the map.
When it posts, there we go.
Yeah, there's the setup for there's actually a setup for a Newton's Cradle game. And as to my Discord server, let me go grab that link real quick. Read this first. There we are. And copy link. This is our Discord community. And I routinely run about 2 or 3 games. I routinely run about a teaching game every week. And some weeks I've done 2 or 3 or 4. And Jacob has actually run a teaching game for me at an online convention.
Yep.
And the virtual map is here. Oops. I can type. I can even type and talk at the same time, I think. No, I probably shouldn't do it. cbi.net. And that is our website where the virtual map lives. Analog Space Combat by Internet, or ASCII. We have regular teaching games for we have regular teaching games for Attack Vector run by Matt Francois. I run regular teaching games for Squadron Strike. Brian Trotter runs regular teaching games for Squadron Strike. We're trying to reinvigorate our play groups after the lull that happened in the over the holidays. But one of our regular play groups meets at 1 o'clock Eastern time on Thursdays. That's the one that Jacob actually plays in semi-regularly.
Yep.
It's called British Thursdays. We have a playtest night that happens every Thursday night at about 7:30 Eastern time. At some point, once I'm no longer staring at 3 different products that need to be completed, I'm going to get back to running Scenario Fridays on Friday evenings. And we used to have a Pacific Tuesdays group that just seems to have just vanished as people just stopped showing up. If it's not on a schedule and you're a grown-up, it doesn't really exist. So we try to actually have regular recurring groups that will run and play things on a regular basis. Because that way you put it on a schedule and people will actually show up from time to time.
Well, thanks for doing that, because too often complex games don't have things like Discord servers. And if it weren't for people like Spaz, I would have stopped playing X4 a long time ago if it wasn't for a combination of Spaz and the Discord server. Otherwise, I would have just thrown up my hands and say I give up.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of people very eager to tell you how the game works because it is very fun and they want more people to play with.
Yes,
myself included.
And the other thing I will say is that come in for a teaching game, just drop on in and ask for one. Give me 2 dates, and come in and give me 2 dates and 2 times that work on those dates, and I'll tell you which one works for me. And I will go round up another player because the teaching game works better if I have 2 or 3 students at a time. Better use of my time, and you guys have more fun. And once we get you hooked, that's when we ask you to buy the product. But you don't have to pay before you learn to play the game. We consider teaching games to be like doing a demo at a convention or doing a demo in a game store.
This looks very complicated for some idiot like me. I'll tell you what.
Brian? So Brian, got a question for you.
I'm so dumb. What? Yeah.
I got a question for you. I've seen you live stream playing your games, playing some of the games that you do, and it's not so much that it's more complex; it's that more of the game is exposed. More of the things that you have to make decisions about are exposed, and some people like making decisions and thinking them through, and some people want to click on things and see the movie unwrap. Depending on the setting, I think you would enjoy Squadron Strike. There are some settings in Squadron Strike that I'm not sure that you would enjoy. For example, one of the settings that has been built twice and is going to go and is going to get redone another time, a third time at the very least, is this one. I'm going to go put a piece of artwork up as soon as I find that. Rocket cover web. There we go. Yes. So,
there you go.
If you saw that piece of cover art, there's the answer I'm expecting.
Count me in.
That is a nice piece of cover art. I will grant you that. That is a very nice piece of cover art.
You hadn't yet Orion drives.
Granted, I've been out of the board game scene for several years now, but having played a very obscure game called Nighthawks way back when it was published by TSR, and it was part of the Star Frontiers RPG system. It was the board game based on that. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of right off the bat.
So in this timeline, the Apollo program was actually a deception to let SAC General Michael T. Powers, an actual honest-to-God historical figure, go and do Project Orion. And Kennedy was not assassinated. And America had Orion Drive spaceships in polar orbits starting in the mid-60s.
What?
And then the Soviets caught up and things got very interesting.
And then Jimmy Carter got elected president and signed a treaty that basically gave the Soviets control of large chunks of the moon. And Ronald Reagan got elected by saying, you got to elect the Republicans. That Democrat peanut farmer gave the Russians the goddamn moon.
Which So far, so in character for Ronald Reagan.
It does sound like
Knowing what
something.
we know now.
It does sound like something he would have said. Yeah.
And in his State of the Union address in 1982, in his State of the Union address in 1972, he basically said, "America cannot afford to let Mars turn red." And so we went towards Mars.
Yeah.
And the lunar treaty took a line. And the lunar treaty says, "No truce outside circumlunar orbit." Oh, sorry, no truce. So now we have Soviets versus Americans flying Orion drive ships, lobbing nukes at one another, trying to win uncontested control of Mars.
I imagine it's a very rock attack sort of game if you have 1970s tech throwing nukes at each other.
Hey, 1980s.
That doesn't help much. You don't exactly have nuke sniffers and electronic warfare in the 1980s.
It still sounds
Nukes
like
are still plenty deadly.
it still sounds cassette futury, which
Definitely.
which I love.
It absolutely
obviously.
is.
Which I
It is
do love.
absolutely cassette futury. One of the other products that I don't have cover art for yet is Ringgate. I was frustrated with the project and started mucking around with the ship design spreadsheet and ended up designing 2 factions, then a third one, then a fourth one, and came up with a background for them. And the Ringgate universe is set in the late 2100s. After we discovered just how badly we screwed up the environment with global warming. Now the dominant powers are Australia, Korea, and Argentina. Because everything towards the middle of the equator ran into famines, and then there was the milk plague.
Sounds fun.
Milk
Yes.
plague.
Yes. Somebody genetically engineered a note that I wrote this in 2017. Somebody genetically engineered a coronavirus that used the receptors that keep people from that allow adults to drink milk without getting sick as its entry point.
Ah. Yeah, that'll cause some trouble in places outside of Asia, mostly.
Yes. And it wasn't a lethal plague, but it was a mass debilitation event. And between that and the crop collapses and the like, it was a very bad 70 years.
And then we went to space.
Mm-hmm. And now you know why Korea is one of the spacefaring powers. In addition to the fact that they managed to colonize most of Greater Korea is what we now call Siberia.
Wow.
Lots of interesting things have happened. I guess have happened over the past 100 years.
I do.
Yeah,
I do love these settings. I must admit, I do love these settings.
So one of the things that happens in Ringgate is that an AI-driven probe was exploring the moons of Uranus and stumbled across a thingamabob.
As probes tend to do.
As probes tend to do. It came across a thingamabob. And they figured out how to turn the thingamabob on. And the thingamabob is a gate that looks like a ring. And it has an interior diameter of 18.34 meters. And the properties of physics inside on the other side of the gate in a space called ring space are very, very different. And one of the things you can do in ring space is that if you run a current from a power plant on our side of the gate through the gate to the other side, the difference in time means that the calculations for power conversion are very, very different. Which led people to believe that the ring gates were actually created by people who are native to the ring space, who punched into our universe as a power extraction mechanism.
Okay. Is that the one that's like 2 movement modes at once? I remember there being one of those.
That is one that has 2 movement modes, but ships in ring space move by mode 1. Ships in Newtonian space move by mode 2.
Ah, right.
One of the other things that they've supposed is that the dark energy that's causing the expansion of our universe is actually the mind tailings of that energy extraction from the Ringgate universe.
Whoa,
Fun.
that's interesting. That's interesting.
And the other thing is they learned how to build more ring gates, but they found out that you can only install a ring gate from the ring space side. So you have to send it through the gate in parts, assemble it in ring space, and then expend a couple of nuclear weapons in a very carefully contrived pattern to punch through.
And also
back into
hope
our
that,
space.
hope that you punch through in the right space, I imagine.
Yes, that does help. However, it's a little bit easier to find out because distances in ring space are compressed by a factor of e raised to the power of e raised to the power of e.
Understood.
And our constant e shows up in a lot of places in ring space that doesn't apply in our universe.
E being the constant of...
Natural logarithm. 2.817. The rest of it's an irrational number that goes on from there for bazillion.
All right, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Euler's number.
Yeah, Euler's number.
Euler.
So, yeah, Euler's number shows up in ring space in a lot of the physics in places that it shouldn't. So they found a bunch of other ring gates and went through them. And have found a few other cultures that are traveling through ring space and are being very circumspect about being caught in ring space.
But they've not found the locals.
If they have found the locals, nobody's reported back on it.
Ah.
They have they punched a ring gate into a star system and found a Jovian planet, because you basically need to anchor a ring gate around a gas giant sized mass for its orbital period. They found a Jovian-sized planet that had tens of thousands of O'Neill cylinders around it.
That's a lot.
And every single one of those cylinders was filled with corpses.
Ah, cosmic horror, my favorite.
I kind of describe Ringgate as the interference pattern between Arthur C. Clarke and H.P. Lovecraft.
Works for me. Like, I'm sold.
Yes, that sounds to me too.
I've got a question for you, and I think I probably know the answer, but you never know, because I've got a friend who works at a AAA developer, and he's a director, but he started out as an ichthyologist. And so my question is, why did you say to yourself, hey, board games, instead of, hey, video games? Or why say board games at all?
So part of it is that when I tried taking computer science classes in college, I bounced right off of them. Part of it is also that I had started out doing board games and RPGs while I was in high school. I actually paid for my first year of college by publishing the second cyberpunk RPG that was ever published. Yeah, Renegades. And if you can find a copy of it with the blue cover, I will pay you $20 for a copy to send it to me. I will pay you $40 for video of you putting it through a shredder, pouring lighter fluid on the shreds and lighting them on fire.
But the one with the blue cover.
I published an RPG when I was 16, and I don't want anybody, and I want people to know that it exists, so that they can either send it back to me or so they can destroy it so nobody else can see it. That's what's going on, Brian.
Okay.
Well,
Remove all the evidence.
Yes. To give you an idea of just how bad it was, I figured that D100 tables weren't enough resolution, but if you took 3 10-sided dice, you could get a D1000 table lookup.
Oh no!
But D1000s.
Hey, wait, what? Is that?
Let the man finish.
Sorry.
Okay, so a D100 you take 2 D10s. One's a 10s die, one's a 100. One's the ones die. For a D1000, you take 3 D10s. One's the 100s die, one's the 10s die, one's the ones die, and you roll all 3 of them at once, and you get a number between 999 and 0 and 000.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. Okay.
Yeah, I had to unpack the D1000 thing for you because I realized that you probably hadn't played Call of Cthulhu, or if you had, you lost enough sanity points that you didn't remember playing it.
I've played Warhammer, so same principle.
Yeah. So it turned out that a flat D1000 table, wasn't really what I was looking for.
Really?
So what I had you do was I had you roll 3 D1000s with 3 and take the median value.
Wow.
What median? There's 3 of them.
I was 16. I was, in my defense, I was 16. It was 1986.
So, what did we learn from this?
Also, in your defense, compare that to Shadowrun, another game that was out not too far around that time. Mm-hmm. And it included a mechanic in which you could die. You had a 1/6 chance of dying from a fall from any height, which included things like tripping over a curb on the street.
Oh man, I remember this rule.
That sounds like a King's Quest game. That sounds like
you had it. Yeah, so if you had a fall from any height, you would roll 1d6, and you could die from that. From a fall from any height, including tripping over a curb.
Mm-hmm.
So, will we find this game in the desert next to those ET cartridges?
Maybe, I don't know. But I was running this game. I was running this game off of a bulletin board service that I was running out of my bedroom with a second phone line that I paid for with the proceeds from this game, and kept on selling it until I graduated. And kept on selling until I graduated from high school, and the money that I made from that helped pay for my first year of college. So that's kind of why I did board games before I did computer games, and then I tried taking computer programming in college and just bounced right off of it.
So you have technically been in the tabletop gaming industry from since age 16.
From age 16, yes.
So what did we learn? We learned once again that you can become a very competent game developer if you just screw up enough along the way.
Yep, that's kind of that was the course curriculum when I was doing it.
I'm sorry, 3D1000 take the median. That's a complete first. I'm still recovering from that one.
But it
I'm going to need you to roll the entire dice bag.
But it paid for your first year in college. Go you.
Admittedly, that's because I also had a perfect ACT score and went to University of Alaska, growing up in Alaska. And with a perfect ACT score, everything over 9 credit hours was free, and I was paying in-state tuition. And I just had to pay for books and I had to pay for my books my first 9 credit hours.
Okay, I withdraw my go you then. Okay.
It's less impressive than it sounds, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned from doing these board games is that the trick to making board games work is that you have to remember that you're not making the game for you as the developer. You're making the game for the players. And that means that you have to put the game in front of players. And you have to put the game in a situation where you don't have an ego involved as you watch them play. The most useful playtesters I've ever had were the ones that almost got it. They were playing along, and then suddenly they got lost. And then I could sit back and look at my notes and go back and ask them questions and say, okay, you were fine up to this point. This is how I explained it. Let's see if I can find a different way to explain it that works for you so I can find out what I missed in covering this for you. I found and yes, Emmett, I really did in fact use rules-based buff to pay for credit hours, because everything over 9 credit hours was free at University of Alaska Fairbanks if you had a high enough ACT score, which is part of the reason why I took 21 to 24 credit hours per semester for my first 3 semesters of college. So learning how people fail on things is an important piece of information for developing games. It is also something that is very important for doing computer games when you have early access and beta stuff. One of the things that I really find frustrating when I watch the dialogues on computer game development is just how, boy, that's the other reason I'm not in computer games, aside from just not having the programming or art skills for it. It's the interacting with the customers. Oh, good Lord. It's like the online forums for computer games are a filter for how much of an asshole can you really be?
Oh, man.
We know that all too well around here.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
And, compared to putting up with that versus, making board games and making less money, I'd rather make the board games, to be honest. I value my mental health more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally fair.
The way the way I describe a friend of mine who happens to be a woman who works in computer games. Let me look at her inbox for her work email.
Oh no.
And you know what? And I didn't read any of the emails because that's confidentiality, but I could just read the headers.
Oh.
As she scrolled through.
Oh no.
And if I had to put up with that for my job, I would just I would go work in a sewage treatment plant to find a better grade of turd.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about that's not necessarily a familiar experience, but a expected one.
We can say that we know quite a few devs who have been on the show and are no longer in active development.
Yeah.
Because of that kind of thing. Yeah.
Plus the fact that video games are built entirely on crunch. No matter what they say, there is not a single video game that didn't end in soul-crushing crunch at the end. And the programmers that they get straight out of college. The artists they get straight out of college. So they're 21 and 22 and think that working 80 hours a week for a video game is the coolest job ever. And then they burn out. Badly. Fast.
Yep. It's not. Yep, that's an entirely correct assessment. That is how things just work in the industry.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I can actually make a very modest living, and it becomes slightly less modest as I put out more products. But I can make a modest living. I can make a modest living by spending money printing products and selling them, and make my money back and a little bit of a profit, and keep the lights on, and work on the next one. And each product that I do adds to this, and I don't have to answer to anybody but me. Well, okay, I have to answer to the cat.
Always got to answer to the cat.
Well,
yes.
Management, after all. Yeah.
Yes, he is upper management. And that is part and parcel of how this works. I don't have to justify to somebody why I'm making Attack Vector. Attack Vector has its audience. I don't have to justify to somebody why I'm publishing Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey has its audience. But I can, as the publisher, talk to the dev team on Birds of Prey and say, so everything you can do that streamlines this just a little bit more without sacrificing the things that make Birds of Prey frickin' awesome. I encourage you to do. Please do not worry about, let me worry about the publishing details. Tell me what you need. I'll find the solutions for it. Because Birds of Prey is the product that sells the best through game stores, but it seems to have the slowest growing, it seems to have a flat player base. In board games, there are three audiences. The first audience is the audience that buys it, never takes it out of the shrink wrap, but puts it on their shelf for their collection, or leaves it on their shelf and sighs and goes, someday.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the audience that buys the game, reads it, then remembers that they don't have the social skills to actually talk other people into playing games with them face to face, puts it on the shelf and goes, someday.
Ow!
And then there's the audience that goes, "Oh, this is cool. Let me go tell Fred about this." And then they go take it to their buddy, and they teach their buddy how to play it. And if I'm very lucky, they are one of the roughly 1 in 50 players who not only teaches it to their buddy, but goes and takes it to the game store with their buddy. They play it, and they play it there regularly. And eventually, other people at the game store recognize that these people with the space map aren't, in fact, face-eating cannibals, and inch closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. What's that? I've been seeing you here for the last month. Is that fun?
Kind of.
And then, you get people, and then you get new people showing up. But board games, what sells games is word of mouth. What sells games is sitting somebody down at a demo and, walking them through how to play it. Marketing copy helps a lot. A theme helps a lot. That picture, that cover of Rocket Punk, that is the most 80s cover that ever 80'd ever anywhere. I mean, that is more 80s than the movie. That is more 80s than Streets of Fire.
Agreed.
That is
pretty 80s. Yeah.
That is more 80s than Iron Eagle.
Oof.
Wow.
Whoa. Slow down there. Whoa.
Claim there. That's a bold one he pulled out. Even I got that one.
Whoa.
It's not wrong, though.
Next thing you'll be saying it's more 80s than Megaforce, and that, sir, that's a line I don't think you can cross.
No, but I did in fact make a miniatures game that I ran 2 scenario conventions that are based off of Megaforce.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
No, not really.
Well, on that note, we need to start wrapping up. It's been an hour and a half. We need to go.
Okay.
Well, some people, it's late for some people. For some people, lunch is approaching. So
I wouldn't say carry the show
you did, though.
So long,
you did carry the show. You did a great job. You did a great job.
I was supposed to carry this show,
you
and
were,
I did my best.
You were, and you did a great job carrying
I would like
the
to
show.
show one more piece of artwork. If I can, I'd like to show one more piece of artwork because this is the new Birds of Prey product that I'm.
Go ahead.
This is the Birds of Prey product that when I'm off here, I'm going to go to the packing table and pack more of. Let's see. There we go.
Which is, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
Well, the original plan for this was to actually have this in game stores on May 20th, with the movie premiering on May 27th. That didn't happen.
That did not happen. I do need to look at the Birds of Prey because, again, the problem is it doesn't have the same virtual tabletop environment as AVT and Squadron Strike, but it is exactly what I want, and what I want is a competent jetbot game.
Yeah,
because I'm insane.
Up until DCS came out, Birds of Prey was more accurate than any flight simulator, than any combat flight simulator you could put on your TV, that you could put on your computer. Up until DCS, it was more accurate.
I don't know which one I'd rather play.
Well, DCS, you actually have to have you have to actually have fighter pilot level reflexes and situational awareness.
Yeah.
In theory, in practice, no one has those. I have played DCS, especially in multiplayer, and I have seen the most oblivious people on Earth. I could just flying an F-18 at like 1,000 feet above ground level, just roll up on them in a MiG-21, wave to them from across the canopy. Nothing, no reaction. Completely clueless.
Can you wave to other people in that game? Can you
symbolically wave to other people?
Okay.
Though in the F-14 you can salute your catapult crew to have them send you off.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's neat.
But up until DCS, Birds of Prey was more accurate than any computer flight simulator you could get without a security clearance. And the thing about birds of prey is that what we do is we have the box set and we have products that cover specific conflicts. In this particular case, we cover two particular conflicts that are done in documentaries. One that was released in 1986 and one that was released in this last year. And
Yes.
we have 14 air-to-air engagements from both of these conflicts.
Oh wow!
Yes,
that's funny.
featuring the famous Soviet Middle Eastern design of the MiG-28 and the.
Hey, that was totally a copy of the F-20 of the F-20. Somebody
Yes.
smuggled those blueprints to the to Eastern Europe.
Oh man!
to Eastern Europe, and that made its way somehow into the Persian Gulf. Yes.
So anyway, so we do need to wrap up. I'm putting the
Right.
I'm putting the foot down. So friends, you can go to Ad Astra Games. It's ADASTRA Games.com to learn more about the four systems that you have. We didn't even talk about the other one. What's the other one? Just looking at it. We didn't even talk about the Traveler. We didn't even talk about that one.
Traveler is Squadron Strikes. Is a Squadron Strike setting.
Oh, okay. I thought there was a different.
It is a separate
It's an ultimate box set.
Yes, the whole story that has a whole different story attached to it, but we're not covering that. We're leaving.
Yes, and I will tell the story about that in the Trail of Bodies.
Oh God.
The next time you have me on.
Next time. So you can check out these products on adastragames.com. There are quite a few of them, and they look fascinating for someone who is interested by board games. And then there was a link in the chat, but I'll also put it on the website when the MP3 goes up to the Discord server if you want to learn more or do a training game. Those are run regularly. It sounds like. So if this has any interest to you, and it probably does, definitely check it out, because it sounds like if this clicks with you, it sounds like there's a lot of joy to be derived from this sort of thing, which is great.
There's also some nonfiction books that I put up there on various things related to space science. One of them made me a Hugo finalist, a Hugo Award finalist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there is also the most expensive RPG you'll ever own in terms of cost per page. Minimus, the 4-page RPG. It does everything that GURPS does in 4 pages.
Yes.
Actually, 3 pages, and provides a setting ready to run on the 4th page.
Was that the one I got as a gift for overpaying?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it was.
Did you ever read it?
I did. Well, it's 4 pages. It didn't take long.
I'm looking for that on your product page, and I don't think I'm seeing it.
Look,
I might be missing it.
I know it's on there.
I might be missing it though. It's probably here. Oh, there it is. I see it now. I see it. $3.
Yep.
So it's basically 80 cents per page.
Yep. It's 75 cents a page, and I print this out on an 8.5 by 11.
75 cents.
Yeah, and I print this out by an 11 by 17, folded up into a 4-page folder, and I will give somebody the basic pitch and say, on page 1 we give you character creation, an unbreakable character creation system. On page 2 we give you a task sequencing system that once you've used it once, you will want to use it in every role-playing game you ever GM. On page 3 we give you all the rules for GMing the game. On page 4, we give you advanced GMing techniques pulled from Hollywood screenwriters' Bibles and a complete setting ready to run. Now, normally I charge $1 per page, but as a special convention price, if you buy page 1 and page 2 and page 3, I'll throw in page 4 absolutely free.
And that's a good salesman, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, you've done this a lot. I can tell you've done. I can tell you've done this a lot. So yeah, at Ad Astra Games, you can find information for all this stuff, and the links for the Discord and all that will be on the website once the MP3 goes up tomorrow. But yeah, the description is longer than the actual. Yeah. So Ken, I want to thank you for coming back on again, and we will definitely have you on again when what's the name of the thing that you said was going to be ready? Newton's Cradle, whenever that's, you should, since you don't have the year on the website, you could say expected to ship June 27th of 2024. You don't have the year on there, so it could be next June. It could be 2 Junes from now. It's fine. It's totally fine. You don't have the year on there. You don't have the year on there.
I want it out because I've already paid for all of the out of shop components. So I want to make my money back.
Right. Well, give us a heads up when that's about to ship, and we'll definitely have you back. And maybe we'll have time for. I didn't have time for a training game, but maybe at some point in the future I'll have time for a training game where my brain. But okay, if I ever attend a trading game, I'm just telling you, I'm giving myself permission to leave if my brain starts to melt. Like if it's like, this is too much, I'm out. Because I can kind of tell, I know myself, I can kind of tell this might be too much for me. But if it's not too much for you, my friends, definitely check it out because there's a lot to love here. You can tell a lot of love and blood, sweat, and tears have been put into this. So you should definitely check it out if you have any interest in space combat and board games.
And if you've ever gotten tired of being blown up because your reflexes aren't fast enough, come. Analog Space Combat by Internet is waiting for you.
Oh, that's right. That's another link I have to put in the thing. Was it?
Also, right. We're supposed to end the podcast. Shit.
Right. I'll get that from you later. So, friends, next week is kind of up in the air. I've offered it to a guest, but I haven't heard back. So we might just do a topic show. I don't know yet. So that'll do it for this episode. I want to thank, as always, our patrons, and as always, everyone who's gotten vaccinated already. Thank you to you. If you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, please, for the love of whatever deity you believe in, or deities, please get vaccinated. Oh my God. I shouldn't have to ask this. I shouldn't have to say this.
Wear a mask, please.
Oh God, please. Yes, wear a mask. Masks have been proven multiple times to slow the spread of COVID. Please, there's going to be a gaming convention where they've just dropped the requirement for masks and vaccines. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
You mean Gen Con?
Yes. I forgot the name of it. Yeah, they've dropped the requirements for masks and vaccines, so you might as well just call it Super Spreader Event 2023. So please, my friends, get vaccinated. Wear your damn masks when you leave the house. We gotta. It's so stressful living under a goddamn pandemic. So please do what you can to help us all end this. Please. I shouldn't have to say this. Anyway, okay. Have a great one, everyone.